you explain a little bit more how star trackers work? Because from what I know is that they have an internal catalog. So basically, they take a picture of whatever they're seeing, say the sky, and then they have an internal catalog that they then kind of have to figure out, okay, if I see these stars, I have to guess that I'm in this orientation. So can you go a little bit deeper into kind of how they actually work?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the basics down. The details are all a little bit different by algorithms. Um, but basically, they take a picture of something. You know, sometimes the moon's in there, the sun, the earth, hopefully not. You know, hopefully you're pointing somewhere into deep space. And you get back a mostly black picture with some, you know, bright dots throughout it. And let's assume all of those for now. Let's assume all of those dots are stars. You would then have some kind of algorithm that would go through and scan through that whole image and determine what it thought were bright enough points to be labeled stars. And then it would label all of those stars and say, I think I've got these 6 points here are stars. Then there's another algorithm that's essentially doing a pattern matching between those 6 stars and what it already has in its star catalog of 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 stars or whatever it is that you need in order to be able to determine your attitude in 4 pi steradian space to the degree that you want. So you want your smallest star catalog possible because it costs a lot of CPU time to do that pattern matching. So you don't want to pattern match through 100,000 different stars, for example, if you don't need it. That's just sort of wasteful. Now, how they do that pattern matching, they all do them differently. You can build like triangles between sets of 3 stars, and you can, you know, characterize that triangle in some way, either by the 3 lengths or an area or something like that. And then you can quickly look through the triangles in your catalog and see which ones have the same ratio of those 3 lengths. And then how many of those can I match in one scene so that I can get more and more confidence that I'm actually matched the right pattern. Now, it seems easy, but it's really, it can be really difficult in certain situations because cameras are sensitive detectors, and they're sensitive to like deep space radiation and all sorts of other hazards of space. And so over time, you start to get hot spots, you know, and dead pixels. And so what, you know, was a nice clean image at the beginning of your mission now has a bunch of what look like fake stars peppered throughout them. And you can then start mapping those dead pixels with like a pixel map and subtract those or take them out over time, and you're building up that map. There's a lot of sun glare, you know, the sun coming in at some side angle. If your baffle isn't designed properly or isn't, you know, large enough, you get a lot of glare and glint across your screen. The earth is in the way, the moon is in the way, and it's easy to get confused as to what is a star and what is not a star. So, you know, building a camera that can take a picture of the stars is a relatively trivial thing. Building one that can operate in space and to the degree necessary so that your algorithms can actually pick out stars in the image is tricky, and it takes a lot of people a lot of time to get that right. So more often than not, if you're only using 1 or 2 or 3 star trackers in your project, it makes a lot more sense to buy one that somebody else has already gone through all of this effort of verifying and validating and just running with it than designing your own. It's not like a photodiode or something that can be done relatively simply. But in the case of star trackers and other sensors that degrade over time, you can change how your sensor noise, like how much noise there is in the sensor real time. So with a star tracker, I said, like, if you can see 4 stars, that estimate is not going to be as good as one if you can see 16 stars. Imagine 16 stars and you can match that pattern into your star catalog. You're going to have a lot of confidence that you're looking at the right thing. And each one of those errors of each of those stars is going to kind of blend together and RSS root sum square out of there. And you're going to have a better estimate of where you're pointing versus 4. So the star tracker comes back with its own guess as to how good it's doing based on how many stars it sees and how fast the spacecraft is rotating. Because you can also imagine that when the shutter is open on this camera, if the stars are sort of streaking across because you're rotating, you don't have these nice point stars. You now have these streaks. And you think, okay, well, I can still centroid on that streak and say it was in the middle of that streak. But were you rotating at a fixed rate? If not, then it's not the center. So rotating a spacecraft while doing star tracking decreases its error. So you can take all of that information and then how long you've been operating, like 1 month later, 3 months later, 4 months later, you might start to degrade your sensor just because like I said, with these hot pixels and dead pixels and stuff. So you can take all of that information and you can put that into your Kalman filter and say, this is how much I trust my star tracker. And this is how much I trust my model. And this is how much I trust whatever other sensors are going into it, my magnetometers or whatever. And the beauty of a Kalman filter is that it takes into account all of those statistical distributions and comes back with an optimal estimate. Let's stick with star tracking for now. And it's not straightforward. It's not like you can sit down and say, this is how much processing I need to be able to do, because there's trades in everything. The algorithm that you choose to do pattern matching can vary in how many operations it takes wildly, right? And the result could be that it is you can have a slower processor with less memory and have a less accurate result, because you need to do your star tracking in 1/10 of a second. So just get me whatever you can in 1/10 of a second. That's all I have, like, for example. So there's the algorithm side of things, there's the flight software side of things, and there's the requirements on pointing. Like, maybe you need a star tracker to update 100 times a second because it is your only attitude sensor and everything else runs at 100 hertz. So I better be getting measurements back from my star tracker at 100 hertz. Otherwise, I don't know where I am, let's say. Versus my IMU, my inertial measurement unit, and the rate gyro built into it is really accurate. And I can dead reckon using just the IMU for an hour before I start to break my pointing budget, in which case the star tracker can be turned off, because I'm just going to predict where I am over time. I'm going to use that mathematical model, and I'm going to predict where I am over time using my IMU. And then once an hour, I'm going to wake the star tracker up, take a picture, and it can churn on that picture for 10 seconds because I don't really care. My IMU is amazing. And then it's just going to churn slowly for 10 seconds, return a quaternion or an attitude estimate, and then I'm going to fold that into my Kalman filter, and I'm going to estimate new state, and then turn the star tracker off, and then just keep going.